Hi, everyone. Victoria Alai here, author, life navigator, and self-help addict. I'm here with my good friend, Rimi, also known as Modern Mom, but I'm not sure if you're going by that yet. So do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, thank you so much, Toria, for the introduction. My name is Rimi. I go by RimiK. I also have a handle, RimiK Comedy. I'm into entertainment, improv, and corporate in a corporate setting. I'm also starting, as Toria mentioned, a podcast called Modern Mom, which really focuses on the funny, satirical kind of ideas behind being a mom today, a lot of the expectations, just some of the hilarious things that I see in my unfiltered comedian brain about being a mother in modern day society and also historically. So, yeah, thank you again for the introduction.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad you're able to be here with us today. And the funny thing is, there are so many topics you and I could be talking about. But today, what we're talking about a little bit is the career side. And I know that you and I have been talking as friends just about doing some of the tools that I've mentioned in some other videos about informational interviewing before you go out and actually just send your resume everywhere. Of course, you can do that. But tell me a little bit about what you've been experiencing or where you're at right now, and maybe your little history on this if you want to, where you're at now, where your frustrations are, and why we're here today doing an example or kind of a role play on informational interviewing.
Absolutely. In addition to some of the things that I mentioned already, I also have a long term standing and tenure in high tech. And so I've worked as a technical program manager, product manager, technical marketing engineer. I have a background in engineering, psychology, public relations, journalism, et cetera, et cetera. Soon after I graduated from college, I am no stranger to the recession era. It happened right from the get go for me, but yet somehow I managed to get through and get by and utilize the skills using kind of different resources that I had available to me, books and different resources to be able to get a job fairly quickly. And actually, I had spent years at big companies in the Silicon Valley in Northern California, and I got jobs even through some of the hardship during some of these recessions. But post COVID has been a little bit different. So,
Mm.
good and bad. And starting with some of the good things is that companies, I think, in letting go of a lot of their employees, have been very caring. And recently, my last company, I was with them for 8 years, and they took very good care of me, and they took care of me after they let me go as well. It wasn't anything that was contentious or anything like that. Very smooth handover, gave me an ample opportunity to try to find something within the company for a time period, provided me with benefits afterwards, et cetera. So that's some of the upside, is that companies know that this is something that's going across the board, and also understand that anyone they're letting go is going to have a hard time finding something new, and have been trying their best, I think, to take care of employees, which I, as an employee, really appreciate. However, although I've, again, experienced recessions in the past, this is a little bit different in the sense that in the past, there was still some demand, and having things like a master's degree, a bachelor's degree, an engineering degree, these technical degrees and these technical experiences did give people some kind of advantage. Those rules have been thrown out the window. And
Wow.
so now what I've been seeing is that, and it's not just me saying this, I've done some internet research and I've seen the cool thing is recruiters are actually taking this opportunity to do research themselves and putting out resumes to different companies to see what kind of responses they get. And they themselves are seeing just high level of rejection, if any responses at all.
Wow.
And they're also seeing some response variances depending on what types of thing they're putting on their resume. And so the cool thing is there's lots of resources, there's lots of support, there's a lot of understanding. Companies are understanding, but the downside is a lot of times these companies or these roles are not getting filled for whatever reason. I won't go into, some of the speculations, but a lot of these roles are not being filled either immediately, or there are hundreds of applicants, which has been a little bit unprecedented compared to what it's been in the past. Maybe in the past it's been like 50 applicants for a job, whereas now we're seeing 2, 3, 400 applicants.
Interesting. Reminds me of that movie Dick and Jane, if you've ever seen it. And the
I
guy
haven't. I
shows up
should
and
have.
every
Jim Carrey, right?
yeah, I highly recommend that for anyone going through a job situation right now, or a home situation, or a financial transition, especially around work. Watch that movie and get some perspective. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
But don't take all his suggestions, because he did turn to a life of crime briefly and then got out of it.
Good to know.
Yeah. So tell me about, have you tried doing some informational interviews? Because what we talked about was, the hidden job market is not where you just send a resume out and you apply to anything that you see. So you're like the hunted, so to speak. You're the one that is like, they're sending out the bait and they're trying to get somebody and you're catching the bait and trying to get it, but you're competing with 200 people, it sounds like
Right.
right now. Versus what I learned back in the 80s, actually, dating myself, was this other concept too of the hidden job market where you can get a sense of what you really want to do, the types of companies that might be interesting to you. And you try to find somebody within those companies that, first of all, you can get to know without any pressure. And so the informational interview is an idea that is for people that don't know, where you call someone or you contact them and you say, hey, would you take 15 minutes of your time to just answer some of my questions about your industry, about your background, about my background, how I might be suited for something like what you're doing? And there's no pressure. You're not trying to get a job. And so the cool thing is it's a win way to learn about each other. They get to learn more about what people are out there trying to do and look for. And they also have an opportunity to say, yeah, if you could take this certification or whatever, these things are important. And then sometimes it leads to job shadows, which again are something where you're just testing it out. You're not trying to get a job. And if it all works out and it seems like a match, that's when the normal job process comes in. So it's a little bit of a backwards, like you become more of the hunter than the hunted. Do you know what I mean? And I know there's another recruiter out there called the Big Game Hunter. I haven't seen a lot of his stuff, but I bet it's pretty good when you get to that normal job search. But you were game for this and you went out there, and tell me what your experiences have been so far doing informational interviews.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to share. So I have reached out to quite a few people, and I've even gotten on the phone with quite a few people. And so one thing I just want to mention is that, especially when saying, hey, can I have 15 minutes of your time? People's time is very valuable, and it's very important to respect that. And I definitely have respect for that. And so maybe really being direct and understanding in the approach and the questions and whatnot, and having a list of questions available in hand is very important for me. And I have done informational interviews in the past, and I have had practice with informationals in the past, very far in the past. And so I was definitely open to the process. So I reached out to a few people that I've worked with directly, people that I may have worked with indirectly through other people. And what I found is that, number one, which is perfectly fine, a lot of times the first question comes up is, tell me the context of this conversation. So initially there is some interest in having a conversation. And what I'll do is I'll explain that, hey, I'm in the job market right now. I have this background, and it sparked my interest in terms of what you're working on and looking at. And I wanted to learn more from you. I do have some exposure. So I'll give you an example a little bit more specific. I
Okay.
spoke to someone who I worked with in the past, but we worked in energy harvesting, more energy harvesting type of thing. And it was a little bit more of an innovative, that specific technology didn't work out, although that company is still existing today. But this person and I both left that company, and he ventured out into AR, VR, for example, and I went on to 10 years with other companies. And so I told him, this is my background, this is what I've worked on since you and I parted ways. And I wanted to have a 15-minute conversation with you in terms of what you're seeing within your industry and what that industry is working on, and just chat with you. And that person really wanted to understand the context of what I was looking to talk about and what it is, what my end game was. Like, they wanted to know my end game right off the bat. And so,
Interesting.
yeah. And so, even though I didn't want to maybe apply that pressure or even fully have that intention, and that I did want to have a conversation with that person, they really wanted to know transparently what the end game was. And when I mentioned to them that I am looking for something new, and that's why I wanted to talk to you and see if this might be something that might be a fit for me. And so that person specifically mentioned, have you looked at other big companies? I won't name the company specifically, but have you looked at other big companies? And I hadn't. And actually, by the way, backing up a little bit, that person did go into the different use cases of AR, VR, which I personally hadn't
Which,
thought.
can you explain that to people that might not know what those acronyms are?
Sure. So AR is augmented reality, and then VR is virtual reality. So I'll just start from a very simple, almost silly example, Pokemon. Okay.
Right.
So
Mhm.
Pokemon, people have their Pokemon app on their hand, and wherever they're going, the Pokemon has a map and it shows you what Pokemon is around, and you are playing exclusively on your phone. But there is maybe a game on that app, particularly, where you play with a buddy. So you get one Pokemon, you feed the Pokemon, and what you do is, at that point, you're now incorporating your existing reality. So maybe flash the camera toward a specific direction. You place the Pokemon there. So you've augmented the reality. It is now, you're seeing what you're seeing, but now there's a Pokemon there. So
That
I'll
would
have
be
fun.
augmented reality,
That
right?
would be
Where you're
augmented
basically, like,
reality.
combining reality with something that's coming from the phone or whatever.
You're adding some digital element that's on the phone,
Exactly.
on the screen, and you're pretending that it's there with you and you're feeding this buddy,
Right,
etc.
right.
And then virtual reality, we're probably a little bit more familiar with when we think of like movies like Tron and some of that old stuff,
Ready Player
is
One.
that
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And that's more, you have an Oculus or a goggle set, a virtual kind of electronic goggle set that's surrounding your eyes, surrounding your senses. You have some audio input as well or output as well. And you are now in a completely different reality. You're in a completely different, maybe you're in a game, who knows, you could be racing, you could be playing video games, you could be in an office setting. Different large companies are trying to set up like virtual office settings, things like that. And so that's the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality. So those are the kind of the two acronyms that I'm describing.
Wonderful. Okay. And by the way, these are job possibilities, correct? These are rising
Right.
industries, potentially.
Yes. When I spoke to this gentleman, for example, he actually talked about use cases I hadn't thought of before. So
Oh,
it was things like, hey, you have a maintenance person who's maybe not there yet, but wants to understand what's going on and what tools they might need to bring with them, etc. Then the augmented reality, virtual reality is a way for them to view through the lens of the person who has the complaint or has the issue of what exactly that they're seeing, things like that.
so that saves on travel, that saves on all
Right.
kinds of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. So tell me how you felt when you got done with that interview. What do you think worked and what do you think didn't work? And were you able to get any referrals to other people during that interview?
Yeah.
What was
Unfortunately,
your feeling overall? First of all, what was your
yeah.
feeling overall when you finished that interview?
I felt that I had a direction that I wanted to have this conversation. And it wasn't necessarily from a perspective of getting a job, but it was discussing more. And I felt like my interviewer or interviewee was very set on wanting to understand what my end game was. And
Mm.
maybe perhaps making some assumptions that, and it was something that a perception that I created or set up or built or whatever. But I just felt like I was wanting to have a conversation. I did ask for a referral. So when that person said, hey, have you tried XYZ company? I mentioned, I actually don't have any connections there. Do you have anyone that you might be able to refer me to? And then I felt like a little bit thrown off that it didn't feel like this person wanted to speak to me again or was interested in a follow-up conversation or anything like that.
And didn't give you any referrals.
Mm.
And this is someone you knew somewhat at a previous
Yeah.
company.
This
Yeah.
is
So
someone
you
I
thought
worked with, yeah, in another
you thought
company.
it'd be an easier kind of warm lead, good place to
Yeah.
start,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But it sounds like you got the feeling that he just had it in his mind that you were looking for a job at his company
Right.
and it didn't get beyond that. Do you think
Right.
there was a part of you that was trying to possibly have that as an option in that conversation when you were talking about your background and history, what you've been
I
doing?
mean,
Or do you think that
probably
you
to
were
some degree, that is something that I'm looking that
it's
that I
not
would
easy.
like. But I've worked a little bit with AR, VR, very from a periphery standpoint. I've done a little bit of market research on it and things like that. I know that it would be something that I would want to do further research on. And
Right.
if I'm being totally direct and transparent,
Yeah.
this was someone who I worked with before, and I wanted to really get practice on doing informational interviews. So it wasn't even that my end game was not only not to get a job from this person,
Interesting.
my end game wasn't even
Interesting.
necessarily to have a full blown informational interview with this person. I felt like this would be a good, almost like a practice informational interview for me to feel like this was a person that I felt I worked with well enough that I felt
Right,
comfortable
right.
enough to reach out to. Yes.
Okay, that's pretty funny then given that information.
Yeah.
I was thinking today what we could do is do some practice informational interviewing and see if there's anything that might have come up because like you said he wanted context, quote unquote. Do you think a lot of people might be afraid right now that people are trying to get a job at their company and just
Oh, 100%.
using informational interviews because this is something I really want to put out there is when doing informational interviews it's got to be pure on some level. It's got to be
Mhm.
like I am not trying to get a job from this person. If they get a hint of that, then they're going to not be as forward. They're not
Sure.
going to be as
Well,
forthcoming.
we're
They're
almost in
not
a situation like when the Titanic had gone down and there are, limited people on the lifeboats, and then there are all these people that are surrounding the lifeboat. And I think these people are in a
yes.
position right now where they're on the lifeboat
You
and
know
they're
what?
like,
You're right.
I want an informational interview. I don't want to reach out to you at all because if you pull me into the water, then I'm in the water with you.
And if I'm too good at helping you get a job here, I might lose mine and be in the water instead of you.
Possibly,
So
possibly.
interesting. So this is something I'm learning from this conversation is that depending on the times, these types of strategies may or may not work.
Yeah.
And people right now listening that are employers or managers or SVPs or whatever might be like, what is this woman saying? Trying to get people to call my employees when they're working, when they're, you know?
And I mean, that we haven't even touched on asking for some kind of tour or some kind of on-site, right? Right
Uh-huh.
now, companies are really, they're trying to come up with new technologies. They're trying to come up with new things. Asking for an on-site tour is asking for someone's firstborn child. It's just not,
Interesting.
it does not
Interesting.
seem precedented in the times.
And so that's what we have to be aware of. However, I still think that being able to have some success with this and being, even if it's not in the immediate field, maybe it's a related field, just to break the ice. Because I think that this is such a different way of approaching things that I don't think that the average job seeker has done this kind of thing. I wasn't trained how to do this. I
Oh.
actually read up on it when I was a junior in college and I started trying it out and it started working. And once you actually get onto this, and it really might depend too on where you're finding the people to do the informational interviews. Like maybe it's better to talk to people you don't know
Mhm.
and talk to and meet and go to their conferences or go to their meetups or talk to friends that know friends that are in businesses. Okay, so let's just try doing an informational interview. Tell me who you have right now that you are interested in. You don't have to tell me the person's name or whatever, but give me a little bit of context.
Okay, sure. So maybe like a data center company. So there's a lot of data centers and the cloud is very much in demand right now. And there are a
Mhm.
lot of these companies that an AWS is a big one, but a lot of these companies that are starting to pop up now. And
Mhm.
so I'm not going to name any specifically, but that's definitely been an industry that I've been looking at heavily. And
Right.
so, yeah, so that would probably be context that I would bring up is someone who is in NPI, a new product introduction, someone who's in engineering, who's in product management, principal product management, that type of thing.
Okay, so I'm Jane Smith and I am a product manager at one of these data centers. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't know you.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, Rimi. I'm really glad that we were able to get together. This sounds like a neat idea. You want to know more about the cloud and what we do, what we offer. What kind of questions do you have for me?
Yeah, absolutely, Jane. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I wanted to check in with you and see what is it about working in the cloud industry and within your company specifically that you enjoy, you appreciate. What is it about the technology that you really highlight to the customers and what are some of the challenges and some of the things that are highlights of your position there?
Of course, that's about three questions in one. But I'll start with the first one about what I'm excited about working in the cloud right now. I am super excited about the fact that I think the cloud is the future and it's just going to go and grow and it might take different forms. And I love being on the edge of new things happening. And I love being especially at the growth stage in products. And that's basically where we're at right now. And to answer your other question, some of my frustrations are that we don't have the capacity at our company to fill all the needs. And then we leave ourselves open to competitors and things like that. So that's frustrating to me.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that information. So, first of all, I always like to ask if the data center is on site, is it local or is it remote?
We
Okay.
have several all
Okay.
over the world. And some people are making bigger data centers. We're making smaller data centers, trying to be more dispersed, more, yeah, not take as much energy from one place, that kind of thing.
Do you feel that you have hands on to the direct technology and whether or not that helps you to create your content, to aid sales, to create marketing materials?
I'm not an engineer, but I do have access to use our cloud and everything. So, in that sense, it's been really useful. So, let me stop right now and say something. Okay. Back to being the person. One of the things that I'm noticing is that you're super curious. You're
Mm-hmm.
super curious about people and you're really interested, and you
Mm-hmm.
have detailed, actually, potentially technical questions and stuff too. But
Mm-hmm.
I would say step back and do some more of the basics.
Okay.
The basics being just what do you like the best about your job?
Mm-hmm.
And now the first question was really good, although it was three in a row. Keep it simple. I guess that would be
Okay.
my first thing is keep it simple. And I loved your question about why are you working there? Do you have a spark there or is it just because you're getting a paycheck? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I took from that first thing is what excites you about working here? And so that is what do you like the best about what you're doing here? What do you like the best about your company? What do you like the best about working here? Keep it super simple. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And now as she answers or he answers, then you can take that and use that for different questions. But be careful since you only have 15 minutes that
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to go down the rabbit hole of some of these things because there's a thing of, oh, if this person likes me, then they'll be interested in hiring me or something.
Mhm.
Whereas really what you're doing is you're really doing primary research here.
Mhm.
Be honest about to the person, what do you like about this company?
Mhm.
And then what don't you like about the company?
Mhm.
What do you like about your role? What do you
Mhm.
like about being a product manager? What do you not like about being a product manager? And remember, you only have 15 minutes. So that's what I would suggest is keep it super simple and let them talk because you could have a conversation later as you get to know this person and go out for
Mhm.
coffee or something. This actually brings up a good point is what you're
Mhm.
doing is you're building a relationship potentially with somebody.
Mhm.
So you don't have to get everything out in 15 minutes. They
Mhm.
don't have to like you in 15 minutes. All you're doing is basically being upfront. Tell me what you like about this. What do you like about your job or your career? What do you
Mhm.
like about your role? What do you like about the company? And then
Mhm.
what don't you like? You really want to ask that question. What don't you like? Because just between friends or informational interviewees, people will be honest with you. Oh, this is what I don't like. You
Mhm.
know, and so you want to know right up front. They'll be looking for that opportunity to tell you what they
Well,
don't like.
sometimes they say those things without saying those things. So I have
Exactly.
had a couple of
Yeah.
information interviews where I could
Mhm.
tell by the tone of what someone said, a specific thing, that maybe that was not something that they completely appreciated.
Right, right. Exactly. So you get that. And sometimes, of course, they can't talk directly about these things,
Right.
but personalities and people stealing work and things like that.
Yeah.
This is what the culture's like in this company. I've had friends that worked at companies, big companies, and they do a lot of interviews for those big companies.
Mhm.
And one of my friends was like, I almost wanted to tell this person, don't run the
Yeah.
other way, don't come to this company.
Yeah.
and so, and so the thing is, that's why you want to ask these questions. So I would say, let's try it again, but just keep it super simple. Why don't we switch roles real fast?
Okay.
I'll be
Let's
you
do
and
it.
you be Jane. I'm like,
Okay. I'm Jane.
hi, Jane. I just really want to thank you for your time today. And I know you don't have a lot of time, so I'll get straight to the point here. One of the first questions I wanted to know is what got you interested in becoming a product manager at this cloud company? What brought you to that place?
Sure, absolutely. I have actually worked in product management and similar roles at previous companies, and I've had some exposure to the cloud arena, but not necessarily worked completely focused on that technology. And in doing so, I saw how relevant it is in our current space. Right now, the biggest problem is data. Trying to sort out data, trying to analyze data, trying to figure out what to do with data. And in my previous roles, what I found is that there's a lot of available technology for us to do some of those things, but they haven't been honed and harnessed. And so
Interesting.
I thought that maybe this was a good opportunity for me to really dive down deeply within the data center and see how we can implement some of these solutions.
Thanks for sharing some of your history on this. I have a question. What do you like the best about being a product manager?
Sure. I like the cross functional interaction. So I get to
Ah,
interact highly on the technical side. I get to stay up to date with what's going on within the technology and not just in direct cloud infrastructure, but also in machine learning and deep learning and a lot of these other things. And then I also get to stay in touch with operations and supply chain and see what's going on from that perspective as well. I get to stay in touch with sales and see what questions they're being asked by the customer. And so I like being the center point of information, the central kind of source of information from that perspective.
that's why I'm looking at product management is because I actually have a real estate background where I was in the middle of it too. And you're working with like the surveyors and you're working with the financial. And so that piece of it that you just mentioned really helps me realize that this might be a path for myself. So tell me not about your role so much, but tell me a little bit now about your company. What do you like the best about it? What do you like the least about it?
Sure. I love that it's a growing company and there's a lot of opportunity for growth within the company. And because it's a smaller company or mid sized company, there's less bureaucratic red tape. So if I have an idea, I can implement it immediately.
Wow, that sounds great. So speaking of the company, what don't you like about the company that you can share?
It's not so much something that I don't like about the company, but in general, to be a product manager, one really has to know their stuff. And it's not enough to just know the immediate product or the immediate thing that I'm assigned. I have to be able to go 5 layers deep. And a lot of times I'll be asked questions that seem almost out of left field. But in order for me to gain that customer or in order for me to gain that credibility, that's information I absolutely need to know. And that just goes across the industry.
So are you saying that you don't like it when these questions come from left field? Like when I said, what don't you like about the company?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Well,
kind of one of the frustrating parts is sometimes within the company and even with customers, you sometimes get these questions that aren't even relevant?
yeah, it makes me wonder how
That's
much it's
frustrating.
actually about the topic and how much of it is just testing to see if I know.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. So there's a lot of posturing in the industry is what you're telling
Mhm.
me. Okay,
Absolutely.
okay. So so if you were gonna go into a new career again, would you pick this career?
Yeah, 100%. You
You
just the
yeah,
thing
so this
yeah,
is your passion and
yeah, just the
yeah.
thing that I mentioned before, being that center resource, that central resource and that center point of contact, being able to understand what's going on from a business perspective, from a technology perspective, that's something that I really enjoy doing.
So you love being in the heat of the action and what's going on and being part of it and
Absolutely.
growing.
And the customer is internal customers, and they're so appreciative and so generous with their appreciation. I've just found that across the industry.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm excited. So, having talked to you, this gives me a little more desire to learn more. Do you have any other people that you know, either at your company or at other companies, that might be willing to give me 15 minutes of their time that you could check with, maybe, or
Sure.
that you can refer me to? And I'll leave my email in the chat here. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you was, are you part of any associations, or like where do you go to get your rejuvenation in your field, or where do you go to talk to other people that are serious about your field?
Absolutely. There are a couple of conferences that I'm happy to send you some information on. And also, I can just put them in the chat. You can Google them, do a quick Google research on them. And absolutely, I'm happy to send a couple of emails to some colleagues and previous colleagues that I have and see if they'd be willing to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so great. And I would also like to know, does your company do any like internships if I am interested in the future? So they do offer internships. Do they offer, is it possible to do a job shadow there, or is it too private and it's,
Yeah, so there are internships available. Again, I'm happy
uh-huh.
to, send you the job board and show you what that looks like. And if you're interested in anything, feel free to reach out to me and just send me a link of which specific role that you're looking at or which specific internship that you're looking at. In terms of a job shadow, those are usually conducted under NDA, and that would be a longer process.
Okay, that sounds good. And so what I might do too is see if they have some kind of a tour or something online and just research. But what was I going to ask you? Now I'm breaking my character.
Mhm.
Anyway, hey, I would like to ask you, would you be willing to talk with me going forward? Because I really appreciate what you've shared with me today. Is it possible for me to touch base with you in the future and just let you know how I'm doing and see if I have any other questions? Would you be open to another conversation down the line?
Absolutely. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me whenever you want.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to talking
Excellent.
again. And I'll check back with you and I'll keep you posted on my progress.
Oh, that sounds great.
Okay. All right. So now we're out of character. Let me check the time. Hey, we're still on time. So, how did that feel being on the other side of it? Did you get an idea of what I was doing? Keeping it simple, asking questions, using some of the answers to ask other questions, but not going so deep with the person
Right. Yeah.
on yeah. And so do you see how you had basically like like kind of an organizational structure to the interview?
Hmm.
Like just the welcoming of each other, and then
Hmm.
just keeping it simple with a simple question. What
What
do
do
you
you
like
like?
the
What don't
best?
you like? Yeah.
Yeah, what don't you like about the job, the role, the company?
Yeah. And
You
then the
know,
internship
the
question, that was
industry, where do you see this industry going? What
mhm,
got you excited? Are you excited about doing this? I think that initial question of, do you like what you're doing? Do you not? What do you like? What don't you like? That's probably going to lead you into some other things. And that other question I've asked a lot is, if you could start over, would you pick the same career?
mhm.
That's another super good one. So do you see how 15 minutes just flew by? But
Oh,
at
yeah.
the end, we were super focused on paying attention to the only thing I didn't do as an interviewee in that example is that I
Mhm,
didn't keep track of my time better. So that's
mhm.
another thing that I would probably do. Did you
Okay.
have any thoughts about this experience? Does this gives you any other ideas as to how to do the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. Just keep it more simple and light, I think. That really helps. I do still have some concern because I feel like obviously it's a role play and I don't wonder if there's a hidden agenda or motive or anything like that. And so I'm coming from a different perspective. But I think it's important as an interviewer perspective is just keeping it light, keeping it friendly, staying on time, really managing that stuff on that side.
And I would say that's an interesting thing. Experiment with this. No matter what the other person says or does when you talk with them, assume that they don't think you're looking for a job there. Even if
Okay.
they do, even if they are, just assume that they're not.
Mhm.
Okay. And
Yep,
try
that's
that.
good.
Now, what's your next one? What do you have ones coming up?
I have to look. I know I've reached out to someone and that was actually about a job and they did refer me for a job within a cloud space. And so I could reach out to that person and just ask, do you have 10 minutes, 15 minutes for an informational interview? I'd like to learn more about the company and what you like, etc.
That sounds good. And I challenge you to try a different industry too, just to get the
Okay.
concept of the informational interviewing down. So it's not like on the trajectory of your actual job path, possibly.
Mhm.
And so that might help too, is trying something totally different. And then
Mhm.
do you want to potentially come back in a few weeks and let us know how it's going?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Rimi, I think anybody would be crazy not to hire you myself. So if anybody out there is listening, this woman's available to come and help grow your company. So
Mhm.
thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for taking the time.